All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. If you've been tuning in this month, you know that we are celebrating World Space Week. So all week long, spilling into next week, and even the last week of the month, we are celebrating space exploration by talking to astronauts, scientists, and engineers who make it all possible. So lots of fun so far, lots of events still coming up. So head over to exploringbytheseat.com. You can find all the events where you can register to tune in or join in a camera spot like we have lots of classrooms doing today. So really excited for today's event. Today we are connecting with Terry Virts. Terry is a celebrated NASA astronaut, pilot of the space shuttle Endeavour, and crew member on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. He spent 200 consecutive days in space as commander of the International Space Station, which is one of the longest continuous space missions of any NASA astronaut. He helped install the outpost 360-degree observation module called the Cupola, which not only helped him take more pictures than any astronaut before him, but it gave him a deeper understanding of our planet's beauty, climate, and its place in the universe. So I'm going to bring Terry in live with us now. Hey, Terry, how you doing today?
Good. How's it going, man? It's good to be with you again.
Yeah, always great to host you. We've got a great group of classrooms starting to tune in live via YouTube. We've got an awesome group of classrooms on camera with us who are going to grill you with some questions. But for now, I'm going to let you take over for a little bit.
All right. Well, hey, everybody. It's good to be here and talking with you. I know 2020 has been a crazy year for school. Some of you guys are probably at home watching, and some of you may be in classrooms, but it's been a crazy year, but you'll have some good stories to tell in the future. So I want to talk about my space missions, and I've got a presentation. And Joe, can you call it up? Let me know when it's called up.
Yeah, it's up now, Terry.
Okay. And it should be full screen. How's that?
Looking good.
Okay. So as Joe said, I had a chance to fly, well, in the Air Force as a pilot, and then I went to NASA to be an astronaut. And I was a space shuttle pilot. I flew on Endeavour on STS-130. And then a few years later, I went back and flew on a Russian Soyuz spaceship and was in space for 200 days on that mission. So I spent over 7 months in space, and it's pretty cool. I got to be honest. It was a lot of fun doing that. But all of those missions begin with launches. And here's the space shuttle Endeavour. When I launched the first time, it was from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And man, I had been an F-16 pilot. I flew over Iraq. I'd done all this stuff, but there is nothing like launching in a space shuttle. It is so incredible. The sound is this roar that I had never heard before. It was just amazing. And so that was really, really a fun experience. The G forces get up to about 3 Gs. So it's like laying on your back and having 3 of your best friends lay on top of you. The vibration, it's like having your buddy shake you. It's just an amazing experience with the vibration and noise and acceleration. This picture is really cool. A guy named James Vernicatello took this, and it's a long duration exposure. So he just left the shutter on the camera open for a few minutes, and you can see our fire trail. You can see us going through the cloud deck, and you can see the moon there in the distance, and you can see the stars that are trails. And what that is the Earth rotating. So it's about an 8-minute flight into space, and you can see how much the Earth rotates during 8 minutes. And that's because the stars move that much during the time it took us to get into space. Both of my missions were here. This is the International Space Station. It's this massive, giant spaceship, almost 1 million pounds, or it's over 400,000 kilos. And it's bigger than a football field. It's bigger than an American football field or a soccer field or whatever field you want to put this thing in. It wouldn't fit. It's giant. And when you see it at night, there's apps. You can go on NASA's website and find out when the space station's flying over. It's actually a great project for school. What you're seeing is the sunlight reflecting off of it. So you can't see it during the daylight because it's so bright out, the sky blocks it. And you can't see it at midnight because there's no sun shining on the space station. But just after sunset and just before sunrise, the station is still so high up that it's in the sunlight, but down here on the Earth, it's dark. And so the only time you can see the station, or other satellites for that matter, is right after sunset or just before sunrise. And so you're not seeing some really bright headlights on the space station. You're seeing the sunlight reflect off of those giant solar panels and all the modules. One of the coolest things I did, my favorite thing to do in space was take pictures. And I love movies. I actually made a movie last year and it just came out yesterday. So there's a new movie that I made called One More Orbit. It's about setting a world record flying around the planet. But while I was in space, I had the privilege really of getting to make an IMAX movie called A Beautiful Planet. And our director, Tony Myers, was this amazing lady. She's Canadian. She's directed all the space IMAX films over the last 30 years. And this was her final film, and I got to help make it. So here's me fiddling with the IMAX camera and doing a lens change. But this is a cool picture because you can see how weightlessness works and how it's, you can float something right there and not worry about it. Not worry about it for a few seconds, but after a few seconds, it's going to drift away and you're going to lose it. So if you're going to float something, you have to be careful. And these lenses are really heavy. They weigh a couple kilograms or, 5 or 10 pounds. So they're kind of a pain to deal with on Earth, but in space, it's really nice. So some things about weightlessness are easy, like dealing with heavy stuff, and doing pull-ups is good. But most stuff about weightlessness is harder because everything floats away and it makes it really tough. Also, you have to move around with your hands, which is kind of weird, and you carry things with your feet. So it's the backwards of how we do stuff on Earth. I got to cut Samantha's hair, which was something that I never expected I would do. But doing a woman's hair styling was one of my new skills that I learned as an astronaut. It's a 3-person job. Anton had to hold the vacuum cleaner to suck up the hair after I would cut it, and it would go shooting off into space. Sleeping in space is super cool. This is me in my sleeping bag, and that's our little crew quarters. So everybody has a little space that they can call their own. You can shut the door and, call your family on a computer phone system. It was actually a really nice place to be able to get in there, and sleeping is awesome. For this picture, I have that black bungee cord holding me in place just to take a picture. But when I was really sleeping, I didn't. I would just float in there, and it was so awesome to float while sleeping. It was really, really nice. Science is the mission of the space station, and this is something called a glove box. And so you can do experiments that are dangerous if they break or, something gets loose. You don't want it to float away in the space station. So you do it in this glove box. There's a bigger glove box now that lets 2 astronauts work inside of it. But some of the experiments I spent hours and hours and days and weeks working in this glove box on. There was a rodent research thing with mice. There were some other biology experiments with salmonella and E. coli vaccines. And then most of the experiments were just a box. You plug it in, turn it on, and never touch it again. So there's all kinds of different experiments, but it was really fun. I'm a fighter pilot, not a scientist by background, but I did get a chance to do a lot of different science in space, which was really fun. Spacewalking is amazing. That's something that, again, I thought I had done a lot as a fighter pilot and as a shuttle pilot, but there's nothing like spacewalking. You're out there, and that suit is really bulky. It's a couple hundred pounds, probably 150 kilos or more. You just have this thin little plastic shield on your helmet that protects you from space, and you're super busy. I've never been so busy in my life, but the spacesuit is really cool. I have a new book out right now. It's called How to Astronaut, and it's got 50 short chapters about different aspects of spaceflight and how to astronaut. And there's one of the chapters is just how to put on that spacesuit. And it's like a long, involved, takes a couple hour process to get the spacesuit on. But it's pretty cool being outside in your own little personal spaceship. My favorite part about being in space was my crew. This is the Expedition 43 crew. The folks in blue shirts, me, Samantha, and Anton, we all launched on the same Soyuz. I was in space. The other 3 crew members came back to Earth, and then Scott Kelly, Misha Kornienko, and Gennady Padalka all launched on a different Soyuz. And they showed up, and we became Expedition 43 when I was commander, and it was just a great group. There's 3 Russians, 1 Italian, and 2 Americans there. Just really fun. During the day, from basically 12 hours a day, I was working, busy. And at nighttime, usually about 7 or 7:30 p.m., and we can have a question and answer maybe about what time zone we're on. But at the end of the day, I would take my dinner, put it in a bag, and float down to the Russian segment and have dinner with those guys. And it was a great time. Spending time with them was one of the highlights of my time in space. I knew I was finally somebody important when I had my own Lego. Samantha's boyfriend is a French guy named Lionel Ferra, and he made these really cool Lego gifts for everybody for Christmas. So at Christmas time, these little Lego astronauts showed up. It was really cool. So I want to talk a little bit about, this is me as a kid and me as an adult, but my path to being an astronaut really started here. It didn't start on the launch pad, but it started when I was young. I read a book about space and I was hooked. You know, I grew up with posters of airplanes and F-16s and space shuttles and galaxies on my wall. And I was kind of told my whole life that, you know, don't try and be an astronaut. That's a crazy dream. No one actually ever gets to do it. And they're probably right. I was the first person in my family to go to college. It wasn't like I grew up in a family of astronauts or anything like that, but I knew it was my dream. So I read a book called The Right Stuff when I was in high school. I saw an IMAX movie called To Fly, and these things were just super motivating. So I said, you know, I'm going to try and go for it. I went to the Air Force Academy for college, where I majored in math and in French, which is a weird combination, but both were really important. I became an F-16 pilot and then eventually test pilot. And then I got picked by NASA. And so the lesson I learned, and I think the thing that all the kids here on the call today need to really understand, is don't tell yourself no. If you have a dream, everybody has gifts and talents and abilities, you have to go for it. And don't let other people tell you no, and certainly don't tell yourself no. So whatever it is you want to do, you know, if you want to be a doctor, you can't just say, I want to be a doctor and be a doctor. It requires years and years and years of really hard work. If you want to start a company, again, you can't just say you want to do that. It's a lot of hard work. But I found in my career that the harder you work, the luckier you get. So everybody should really hear that lesson. It's really important. Don't tell yourself no. So here's some pictures of the Earth I took. If we were in person, we could do like a competition to see if you recognize it. But these are just some of the photos of Earth that was frankly my favorite thing to do while I was in space. This is Typhoon Mysak, and I saw 23 different hurricanes and typhoons. Actually, there's a hurricane that's going to come here tomorrow. Unfortunately, I think it's going to hit the same spot in Louisiana that Laura did a couple months ago. But I'm looking out my window right now. My bushes are starting to blow. It's going to be windy here at my house, but it's going to be pretty bad in Louisiana. And this was the biggest, most spectacular and also terrifying typhoon I saw. It was Mysak. It ended up hitting the Philippines in the Pacific Ocean. This is a picture of Earth. I just love it because it's really the story of Earth, and that story is water. If you just randomly look out the window of a spaceship, you're going to see water. You're either going to be over an ocean, and you can see the ocean here is gold, and that's because the sun is reflecting off of the water. Or you'll see clouds, which is water vapor. Or you'll see snow or ice. If you're over Canada or Russia, you're going to see some snow and ice. And you can see that thin blue band in the background is our atmosphere. That's our oxygen. And below that blue band is every living thing that's ever been. And above that blue band is this massive, giant universe. And there's nowhere that we can live without spacesuits and spaceships. So it really puts into perspective how awesome Earth is. It's a beautiful planet. It's this amazing place that's been made for us to live on. And it's in perfect balance, but we really need to take care of it because it's our only place that we can live. So, and I just love this picture for that. This is a picture in the in North Africa in the desert. And it is just a really cool place. It's so orange and black. It's on the border between Algeria and Morocco. And you can see these giant sand dunes. I was really surprised that you could see sand dunes from space, but you can. So this is just a beautiful picture of the colors. This is really cool. If you're ever over Africa at night or South America or the South Pacific, you'll see thunderstorms. And these are just amazing thunderstorms over Central Africa. So much power and energy in these. And this is a time lapse. I took a bunch of still images and stitched them together to make a movie. In A Beautiful Planet, there's a really cool actual movie scene of thunderstorms, and they're just amazing. These are the northern lights. This is a good question for your science teacher about the physics of the aurora. So there's Norway. You can see all the snow on the ground in Denmark and Norway. This is a nighttime view of the Earth, but the moon is lighting it up. And that green aurora is actually particles from the sun hitting the Earth's magnetic field, and the magnetic field funnels it to the North and South Pole. There's Moscow and Russia, and you can see all the snow on the ground, and that's lit up from moonlight, which is pretty cool. But the northern lights and the southern lights are made by the sun's particles. And like I said, they get trapped by the Earth's magnetic field, and they just make this incredible green glow. And when you look away from the Earth, if you turn the lights off and you let your eyes adjust, just like on Earth, if you go out, you won't see any stars unless you get away from lights and let your eyes adjust. But then when you do, you see billions and billions and billions of stars. It's just incredible. And they really are, you can't even imagine it. I could recognize planets, but I could never recognize constellations because there's so many stars. And this is a really cool movie I made of just the moon setting, which is pretty awesome. Every moon set was different based on our orbit and geometry and the phase of the moon. And that is it. Good night, moon. This is a cool picture. It's the jungle in the Pacific on the big island of Papua New Guinea in Indonesia. And these are rivers flowing out of the jungle, and the sun was directly overhead. It just reflected off of all these rivers, and it became this explosion of white and black. And so this is what it looks like when the jungle has rivers that flow down to the ocean. Just really cool. And there's Florida and the Caribbean. The Caribbean is so gorgeous, the blue and the turquoise, and it's really, really cool. You can see Miami's in the south of Florida there. You can see Tampa Bay in the middle on the left, and that little bump on the right side of Florida up top, that's where Cape Canaveral is in the Kennedy Space Center. That's where I launched from. And Louisiana, New Orleans is just off the left of the picture. That's where the hurricane is going to hit tomorrow, Hurricane Delta. And that is the last picture I took in space. I remember I looked at it, I looked at the camera, and I said, that's the best picture I'm ever going to take in my life. And I was done. So I think with that, what do you think, Joe? Should we do Q&A?
Absolutely, Terry. Thanks for sharing those experiences and those incredible pictures. The perspective you had is absolutely incredible. So it's great to see some of those images and share those with students during World Space Week.
That was cool.
All right. Well, we've got a great group of classrooms with us live on camera. I'm going to start introducing some of them. I do want to give a shout out to all the YouTube groups who are tuning in. I can see everyone talking in the chat. Now's the time. Start sending in some of those questions for us. We'll work some of those in as well. But I actually do have a question here that I think we should just work in right away, Terry, and get over with.
All right.
We host tons of scientists, explorers, adventurers, and conservationists from all over the world. And what generally seems to be on students' minds, whether it's an ocean rower or a submersible pilot or an astronaut, how do you go to the bathroom?
That's a good question. And that's an important question. It's maybe the most important question you have to learn when you're doing astronaut training. So everything works the same in space in your body. The difference is you don't have gravity to keep things going in the right direction. So you basically use fans. There are fans that blow air, and that air keeps everything moving in the right direction. There's a hose for number one that just sucks it in there, and there's a can for number two that you sit on, and everything goes in there and zooms around like an asteroid field. So it's pretty cool.
All right. Well, that was Logan. Logan's a grade 4, and that was on Logan's mind. So I'm glad we can set his mind at ease.
It's on everyone's mind, I'm sure, Logan. Good question. Airflow. The key is airflow.
All right. Mr. Allen has his students joining us in Brampton. They're joining virtually. So I'm going to bring Mr. Allen into the call here. How we doing, Mr. Allen?
Very good. Great. This is awesome. Thanks for having us. I have a student. Her name is Adina. Adina, would you like to turn on your mic and ask her a question?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Is there aliens in space?
That's a good question. I wrote a whole chapter, my new book, How to Astronaut. I wrote a whole chapter about that because there are a lot of planets out there. NASA has these satellites. One of them is called Kepler. There's a few other ones that are looking for planets, and we're starting to find. I think we found thousands of planets so far. So you would think if there's that many planets out there, there's really billions of planets. That somewhere there's going to be something like Earth that there could be life on. But I did a lot of experiments on my own body. I did ultrasounds on my heart and my brain, and I worked on mice and fish and plants. I think life is so complicated. I think somebody has to make it. So even if there are planets out there, I don't think there would be life unless somebody wanted to make it, just like we were made, I think. But even if there were, those other stars are so far away that you're just never going to get there. The nearest star is about almost 4 light years away. So it takes a beam of light 4 years to get there. And the fastest rocket we've ever sent, we sent these probes called Voyager back in the 1970s. They launched and they actually left our solar system. They were going so fast. And each one of those would take tens of thousands of years to get to the nearest star. But unfortunately, that is something that we just we're not going to be able to do anytime soon. Good question, though.
All right, let's bring another question here from YouTube. Mrs. Hood is wondering about, you piloted the space shuttle. How do you navigate? How did you kind of find your way around?
So piloting the shuttle is really important. And there's 3 different phases. There's launch when the shuttle is a rocket. There's orbit when the shuttle is a spaceship. And there's landing when the shuttle is an airplane and it's coming down to land like a normal airplane. And the shuttle flies in a very different way for each one of those. I spent years training. The most important part was the landing itself. Because flying during launch, normally the computer flies that. Flying in the orbit, we flew, but it was a very manual process. But for landing, we had to land it like a pilot. And so we had this airplane called a shuttle training aircraft. It was a Gulfstream. It was kind of like that white airplane that NASA modified. So it would do a really steep 20-degree, basically like a dive bomb pass. And then it would slowly pitch up and land on the runway. But it was a glider. So it was this doing a dive bomb pass, flying at 300 knots, and then gently landing on a runway like an airplane. But you couldn't go around. You only had one shot at it because there was no engines to have you go around.
All right, so no pressure.
No pressure, yeah. If you screw it up, you just crashed the space shuttle and killed your crew. But thankfully, for the whole shuttle program, the pilots did good and all the landings were safe. All
right. We're going to head to Burlington. We've got some grade 6s hanging out with Mr. Else. Let me bring them into the call here. There we go.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
What was the most difficult thing you had to go through in space?
The most difficult thing I had to go through in space was probably just being away from my family and my friends, because we had our crew, which was great. But the family and friends, I was gone for almost 7 months, my longest mission, and you miss them. You can call home, and the NASA would set up like a Skype or a Zoom call once a weekend you'd have with your kids. But that was probably the toughest thing.
Okay, let's bring in another live group here. This time we're going to hang out with Miss Waterhouse. Her 3rd graders are hanging out in Birds Creek. Let's bring them in here. There we go. Hey, Mrs. Waterhouse.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're spread out all across our board, so we're many hours apart. And I think we can connect with you because we very much miss our friends since we're just in virtual school these days. So there's our connection. Daisy, would you like to unmute your mic and ask your question?
I could hear her.
How do you get Wi-Fi in space?
How do you get Wi-Fi in space? That is a good question. So the space station actually has Wi-Fi antennas, but they're not connected to the internet the way Wi-Fi is down here on Earth. So we have these satellites. They're called TDRS satellites. They're in geosynchronous orbit. So they're going around the Earth once every 24 hours. So they're always in the same spot in the sky. And they do the communication for us. So when the space station has one of these geosynchronous satellites in view, it can connect to the internet. So I had a laptop that had this connection to the internet maybe half the time or 2/3 of the time. So I could go through a procedure and log on to the internet, but it was really, really, really slow. It was like the old days of dial-up that the kids probably don't remember. So I basically didn't do the internet. It was like my chance to escape from the internet. I logged on a few times, but for the most part, I didn't do it. But the Wi-Fi that we have mostly comes through hard lines. So the computer physically plugs into the space station, and then you get this satellite connection. I just made a movie that just came out this week. It's called One More Orbit. And we talked about orbiting the Earth in an airplane where we set a world record. And there was also these satellites that were connected to the airplane. So anyway, so I compared being in an airplane with being on the space station.
All right. Good question. We're going to go now to Lindsay. We've got some 6'7s hanging out with Mrs. Young. Let's bring them into the call. There we go. How are we doing, 6'7s?
Good. Were you always interested in photography?
You know, when I was a kid, I was probably in like 4th or 5th grade, so about your age. And my parents got me a camera, and that was back when they used to have film for cameras. And so it was a Konica. So it was like a camera, you put the film in and wind it. And I loved it. I love photography. I had to teach myself focus and exposure and all that kind of stuff. So as I grew up, I always had a camera. Then when I was a dad and I had kids, my kids would get annoyed and they'd say, "Dad, stop taking pictures." So I'm just the kind of guy that's always taking pictures. As you could tell, I took all those photos in space and did a National Geographic. My first book was a Nat Geo photography book. So it's something I love. Now, my main camera is this iPhone here. I've got some good cameras, but the iPhone is the one I have in my pocket all the time. So that's mostly how I do my photography now.
All right. I'm going to grab another question from YouTube. This is from Stanton. It's a great question. She wants to know, you mentioned that you love working with astronauts from other countries. Did you learn any other languages, and do you stay in contact?
So I learned French as a kid. That was the language we had in my school. And then when I went to the Air Force Academy, they had a French program. So I got a minor in French, and I did an exchange with the French Air Force Academy. And so French has kind of been a part of my life for a long time. When I lived in Germany, I picked up a little German. I lived there for a few years. And then for NASA, I had to learn Russian. It's like mandatory because you're flying on a Russian vehicle, and the Russian half of the space station, there's a lot of stuff in Russian. So learning Russian is part of the job when you become an astronaut. And it is not easy. Russian is not French. I'll tell you what, for English speakers, French is pretty easy. I mean, French and Spanish are just the easiest languages to learn. Russian is not French. So it took a long time. It was a big hill. But once I got over the hill, then I loved it. I mean, I really love the Russian language, but it took some time before I got to that point.
Okay. So Mr. Creston's group is joining, or sorry, Mr. Fulton's group is joining us in Creston, Ohio. Let me bring them live into the call. Ohio.
Hi.
Hey, guys.
Our question is, what type of food do you eat in space?
What type of food? There's a chapter in How to Astronaut about that. So the food is actually pretty good. Some of the food is like military style food. It comes in these green bags. If any of your parents are in the military, they're called MREs. They'll know that very well. And it's ready to eat. You rip it open, stick the spoon in, and eat it. It's really good. Some of the food is dehydrated. So NASA has a food lab here in Houston, and they take meat or vegetables or desserts or fruits or whatever. They dry them out, dehydrate them. And then in space, you take these little plastic containers, you plug them in, hit a button, it fills it up with water, and then you mash it around, and I would spin it around like in a centrifuge, and wait about 10 minutes and it turns into meat or vegetables or soup or fruit or whatever it is you want to eat. So the food's pretty good. It's not fresh. It's much better on Earth having fresh fruit and vegetables and bread and mayonnaise and, but in space, it was pretty good. I actually enjoyed it. And I was happy eating for 200 days. It was fun. It was good.
All right. Good stuff. Where do we have to go next? Mrs. Burns' class in Sterling. Let me bring them into the event. Hey, Sterling.
Hello.
Hey.
We would like to know what was your favorite planet in space and why?
That is a great question. So I could see, I told you billions of stars, but I could never make out a constellation. But I could see the planets, and you could see from Mercury all the way out to Saturn. Beyond Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, whatever, those are too dim and you can't see those with your eyes. But and Jupiter is big and bright, and Mars is red, and Venus is bright, and you can recognize the planets by their colors. But the most interesting planet that I thought was the coolest thing I saw in space was Mercury. It was always real close to the sun. Obviously, it's the closest planet to the sun. And I think it's a planet on Earth that very few humans ever see. Or if you do see it, you don't know that you're seeing it because it's this weird, you have trees or you have buildings or houses, whenever the sun is setting, unless you're looking directly in that direction and you don't have anything blocking your view, you'll never see Mercury. So I saw Mercury a bunch. I took some pictures of it, and it was a really cool planet to see from the space station.
All right, very cool. One more live class to visit, and then we'll do a lightning round. We've got Miss Neely's 7th graders in King Carden. Let's bring them in. There we go. How are you doing, Carden?
I have a question. Would you ever get out of the spaceship? And if you did, what would the experience be? The past experience.
Would you get out of the spaceship?
Yeah, and if you did, how was the experience of getting out of the spaceship?
So on my second flight, I did 3 spacewalks, and they were amazing. They were very busy. I was, in the suit for probably 8 or 9 hours at a time. And there was so much work to do. You know how many pictures I took, and I kept my camera wedged in like this chest pack. So all I had to do was grab the camera, take a picture, and put it back in. And on each of those 3 spacewalks, I only took about 10 or 20 pictures. I mean, I never had even a spare minute because I was just constantly working, because it's dangerous when you're outside. If you rip your spacesuit, or if there's a little micrometeorite or piece of orbital debris that hits you, it's going to be really bad. It's going to be like one of those Hollywood movies. So you want to get your work done and get inside. And it was fun. It was amazing. It was work. It was 99% work. And every once in a while I would stop and I would like rotate away, and you'd see the most incredible thing you can't even imagine seeing. It was like I was seeing creation. Like, humans shouldn't be seeing this. This is God's view of the universe. And then I had to get back to work because I had to put some grease on a bolt, or I had to plug in 2 connectors. So that was what it was like doing spacewalks. Very cool, very busy, a lot of work.
All right. We've got a few groups online who are really curious about, someone getting sick. Was there someone who was kind of a designated medic on the mission?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was me. I was the crew medical officer. By the way, it's so cool to see all these classes in person. I know my friends' kids are at home right now. They can't go to school. So I'm glad at least some schools are able to meet in person. That's encouraging. But my mission, or one of my many duties on both my space shuttle flight and my long duration flight, was being the crew medical officer. And I loved it. I fell in love with being a doctor. I kind of thought, well, in a different world, maybe I'd be a doctor. In fact, after I did some training, NASA let me go down to the local Houston hospital system, and I worked in the emergency room and also in the operating room for a week. So I did stitches. People's pit bulls would take giant bites out of their body, and I got to stitch them up. There were burn victims. There were car crash victims, some drug overdoses, and I got to work on all these people with these really serious medical problems. We actually had a cadaver that we were able to work on that was donated to science. So that was an amazing experience. It was a real honor. I learned so much about the human body. I loved it. So I went to the local bookstore after that training, and I got an MCAT study guide. MCAT is the test you have to take to get into medical school in North America anyway. And I flipped through it for about 5 minutes, and then I put it back on the shelf, and I said, yeah, this is not going to happen. Not at my age. Maybe even in my 20s, I could have done that. But anyway, I was the crew medical officer, so I got to dispense drugs. When guys had a problem, I had this kind of drug pharmacy on the space station. We didn't have any serious problems, thankfully. One of my crewmates had a filling pop out, so I actually did his filling in space in his tooth. And the NASA dentist told me that was the first ever filling in space. So I was also a space dentist in addition to being the space doctor. That was fun.
All right, very cool. You got to be flexible and
yes,
talented in space. Very cool. Mr. Elsa's class, I know they have another question, so let's bring them in.
Do you feel any different in space? Like, are you going to run out of air or anything like that?
So that's super important. On Earth, we have this perfectly designed life support system with air and oxygen and carbon dioxide and water and temperature, and everything just works naturally. It's amazing. In space, nothing works unless you build a machine to make it work. So we get electricity from the sun. We get oxygen in several ways. In some ways, we fly up spaceships full of air, and that's some oxygen. In other ways, we have tanks of oxygen, mostly on the Russian vehicles that come up, so you can put the oxygen in. As you know, our air on Earth is 20% oxygen and 80% nitrogen. And so people don't consume nitrogen. We breathe it in and we breathe it out. Our bodies don't use the nitrogen, but our bodies consume oxygen. So we take oxygen from the air and we take carbon from food and we turn that into carbon dioxide and then breathe it out. So the oxygen gets used up and that level comes down, down, down. So every once in a while we have to replenish the oxygen level, and then it comes down and we have to replenish it, and it does this going up and down. Also, as we're breathing out carbon dioxide, that doesn't go anywhere. So the carbon dioxide builds up, builds up, builds up. And we have these machines that take the carbon dioxide out of the air. So the CO2 level goes up and then we take it out. And then that goes up and then we take it out. So there's this balance between oxygen and carbon dioxide that we're constantly fighting with these machines that we made. And the Russians have machines that deal with that. And the Americans have a pretty amazing recycling system that takes carbon dioxide that the astronauts make. And it also takes water that we breathe out. So we just breathe out humidity, right? If you breathe on a mirror, you'll see it fog up. That's water in your breath. And also pee, right? People have to pee. So in urine, we take that urine and we recycle all of this water, and we can make that water into drinking water, or we can run electricity through it. And that splits up the H2O into H, which is hydrogen, and O, which is oxygen. So we take the oxygen and breathe it, or we take the H, the hydrogen, and we combine that with the carbon dioxide that we breathed out. And that's something called a Sabatier reaction. And then that makes water and methane. So there's this complicated system of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water. And it's a big giant loop, and it's not 100% effective. It's not 100% closed system is what we call it, but it's pretty good. And it saves, what it really saves is a lot of money, because I've got a drink here. It's a third of a liter of water. So a liter of water is a kilogram, and that probably costs $40,000, maybe more, to launch to the space station. So a drink like this would be tens of thousands of dollars. So when water is that expensive, you want to be able to recycle it. You don't want to waste it. And so that's what the system, we have several different systems that do that. That's a long answer, but that's a really good question.
All right. Great question. And nothing wasted. Got to make use of everything that can be kind of recycled and used again. 6-7s in. Lindsay, you're on.
What inspired you to be an astronaut?
Inspire you to be an astronaut?
Yeah.
Well, I think you should be an astronaut so you can see the planet from outer space, which is pretty amazing. Looking down on Earth, it's so amazing. It's like I'm in space and my planet is over there. And this is really weird. Like, that's not a normal thing. So that was a pretty cool feeling to have, to look. And there's Earth, and there's the moon, and there's Mars, and there's stars. And so you just get a really good big picture view of the world. Little silly things don't worry me so much anymore, having had that big picture view. So that's probably my pitch for being an astronaut.
All right. I think it's an easy sell for a lot of the students tuning in right now. I think they'd be pretty excited. Mr.
Yeah.
Allen, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, we do. Jessica, if you could unmute and ask your question.
How do you get around when you're in a rush?
That is a very good question. So in space, astronauts have a saying that everything's harder in space, except for pull-ups. And so it's just hard to rush. You grab with your hands and you can move yourself around. So once you get good, after a few weeks, you get pretty good at moving around, and you can get places pretty quickly, but you have to remember to grab the stuff with you or put it in your pockets or Velcro it to the wall, because otherwise it'll just float off. So you have to develop a skill to be able to move with your hands. And on a spacewalk, I got some advice from one of my fellow astronauts, because I was a first-time spacewalker and he was experienced. And he said, Terry, if you're going slow, you're going too fast. And his point was, you have to move really, really slowly on a spacewalk, because the spacesuit weighs 150 kilos and you weigh 100 kilos or 90 or whatever. And then all the equipment that you're bringing with you weighs another 50 or 100 kilos. And so you're this massive object, and it's really easy to get moving. You just push with your fingertip and you are moving. And so it's really easy to get moving, but it's hard to stop. And so you want to move slowly so you don't have to do this big come to a screeching halt thing. So moving around quickly on a spacewalk is a bad idea. And in space, you can do it, but you have to be careful, because it's easy to bang your head on a handrail or a piece of equipment or something.
All right. Looks like Sierra in Mrs. Burns' class has a question. I'm going to bring her in. Hey, Sierra.
How many people can fit in the International Space Station?
Well, a lot of people could fit on the ISS. I think 13 is the most we've ever had, if I remember right. The space shuttle had 7 sometimes. And so if the station crew were 3, that would be a total of 10. But normally there's only 6 total, because there's only 6 sleep stations. That kind of phone booth size thing that I showed you, there's only 6 of those. So if you had what we call a visiting vehicle, if you were just there for like a week or 2, it wouldn't be too bad. You could take a sleeping bag and find a ceiling somewhere. When I was there on the shuttle, I slept on the ceiling of the European module. I would just clip my sleeping bag up there and sleep there at night. But in general, that does not, there's not like permanent space for more than 6. So normally the station goes 3 people, 6 people, 3 people, 6 people, 3 people, 6 people, as Soyuzes come and go. Now that SpaceX has a capsule to bring people, it can take 4, and Boeing, hopefully next year, will have a capsule that can bring 4. So the station will go basically 7 people, 3 people, 7 people, 3 people, and it'll fluctuate between those numbers. You could put hundreds of people in the station. It's the size of a 747 or bigger than a 747, but they wouldn't live for very long, because they would make all that carbon dioxide, and the station's recycling systems can't handle that much CO2. So if you put 100 people in the space station, probably within a day or a couple days, they would make so much carbon dioxide that it would not be a good place to try and breathe.
Okay. King Carden, one more question.
Both want to ask a question.
How long does it take to recover from space when you come back to Earth?
How long does it take to recover when you get back to Earth? That is a great question. And the answer is, it depends on the person. For the first day I got back, I felt really dizzy. I mean, I was like, oh, I could walk, I could do everything, but I didn't like it. It wasn't fun. The second day I got back was, I went to the gym, I was doing rehab. I could move around. It was okay. I could do basic stuff. The third day I was back on Earth, I went with my daughter to summer camp. So we drove a couple hours away, and I didn't drive, but I rode in the car and I was able to move around. After a week, I had been going to the gym every day. I was doing 20 pull-ups. Physically, my muscles were strong. And I did a balance test, and my balance score a week after landing was better than it was before I launched, which was crazy. I couldn't believe that happened, but I was very lucky in that my body really adapted. The first day is painful. The second day is less painful. The third day is not too bad, but you can still feel it. And for me, just a few days later, I was back to Earth. It was kind of crazy.
All right. And we'll give final question of the event to our third graders. Let me bring Ms. Waterhouse back in.
All right.
Thank you. We have a little bit of concern about what happens if you need to sneeze while you're in space.
So I know. And if you sneeze today, everybody looks at you like you've got coronavirus. So no, you don't want to sneeze if you can avoid it. In space, you would think if I go achoo and I sneeze that way, you'd think I would go flying backwards. But we tried that, and you could sit there and blow and sneeze or whatever to see if it would shoot you off in the other direction, but it really doesn't. I think you're just so heavy, and that sneeze just puts out so small force. It's hard to move yourself with air unless you like grab on and do that. Or if there's a fan blowing you and you wait for like minutes, it will eventually move you for sure. Every morning, I would sleep in this sleeping bag floating, and every morning it rotated me into the same corner of my sleep station. So I was like a bad student when the teacher makes them go stand in the corner of the classroom. That was me every morning. I'd wake up in the corner like I had gotten in trouble.
All right. Well, Terry, I can't resist this last question from YouTube. Music. What tunes did you bring with you to space?
So I have a Pandora account, and this lady named Beth Turner was my family support person at NASA. So she took my Pandora account, and she would hit play and record these 3-hour blocks of music and upload them to me. So every couple of days I would get a new set of music, and I like all kinds of music. I like classical music. I like dance, pop music. I like classical rock and roll. In fact, on my space shuttle flight, I brought a Van Halen CD. Eddie Van Halen just passed away, so I was thinking of him. I brought like Christian music and country music and chill out jazz, just to chill out. I like movie soundtracks. I listened to Interstellar for probably a month. The Interstellar soundtrack is incredible. If you guys like cool movie soundtracks, the Hans Zimmer Interstellar soundtrack is amazing. So I'd put my headphones on, plug them into the laptop, and just float listening to Interstellar. I did that for a month. It was really cool. So I listen to all kinds of music, and it's important just to keep your brain connected with Earth. I will say also, this was amazing. The Russian psychologist sent us MP3 sounds from Earth. So birds, waves, crowded cafe noise. It was rain. And listening to that sound from Earth was amazing. I tell in How to Astronaut, there's a story about the dreams I was having that was pretty cool.
All right. Well, Terry, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to give a huge shout out to all of the classrooms who joined us on YouTube and Facebook. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you to all our camera classrooms. Good to see classrooms, whether it's virtual or, if you're able to be in the classroom. So thanks for your great questions. And again, Terry, thanks for sharing, some of your adventures in space with us, your perspective looking back down at home. And yeah, I mean, you sound like you're keeping busy with movies and books. Lots on the go.
It's been awesome. It was fun sharing with you guys. I'm so glad to see these classrooms going in this crazy 2020, but it's good. Keep on learning, and whatever you're going to do, if you're going to be an astronaut or there's a million other careers, education is super, super important. That's the key to life in the 21st century because it's changing fast, and education is super critical.
All right. Well, again, thanks everyone for joining. Check out all our space events coming up this week, next week, and towards the end of the month, exploringbytheseat.com. Terry, thank you so much. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.